boy, oh boy, let me tell you, this movie, it's not looking good for it at all. I admit, I really thought that the goodwill of the first one, the first movie was going to push this second one to at least reach some of the heights, financially that the first one got. But man, look at this score. 34%. It has dropped down to 34% by the critics, and it's at 36% right now with the audience. I have not gotten a chance to see it, but I don't want to talk about the movie in particular, like the intricacies of the film. I want to talk about the outcry going on right now. The fans, the audience that are coming out and screaming about who's to blame for this disaster of a movie. Who's to blame for this happening? Because there's a lot of blame going on, at least a lot of finger pointing going on, and it's kind of getting out of hand. I mean, we knew that this was a possibility with this movie. I was not a big fan of the first one. And even with having that understanding that I didn't like the first one, I thought that the second one had a chance of being at least close to the success that the first one was. Hearing what people are saying, I can understand why the second one isn't going to be as, critically loved or even audience loved as the first one. But let's see what is kind of going on in the social realm here. All right, first off, IGN posts, in a year with no other new DC movies, Joker, Folie, Deux should be a big deal for DC. So why does it seem like nobody cares about a sequel to one of the biggest, and it says Batman movies of all time, which, first off, that was a poor choice of words because they shouldn't have said Batman. It wasn't a Batman movie. Just because it's Joker, they shouldn't have put Batman movie in there. And our buddy Aaron Fisher says because WB has fractured the fan base beyond repair. And I'm going to be honest with you here. He isn't wrong. Warner Brothers absolutely fractured the fan base over the years. The DCEU was absolutely a big issue with the fan base. However, Joker 1 was a massive success. The Penguin currently on Max, on HBO, is a massive success. The Batman was a huge success. So to sit there and say it's because Warner Brothers has fractured the fan base beyond repair, well, that's factually untrue, Aaron. And you know that. You kind of just expanded and exaggerated what you said there because Warner Brothers has fractured the fan base. Yes. Beyond repair? No. Penguin's a huge success. The Batman, huge success. Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, huge success for DC Studios. But that isn't a DC studio. You're right. They bought that property, but it is a huge success under the DC Studios banner. So, yes, it has fractured. Warner Brothers has fractured the fan base, but it's not the biggest problem that you're saying. It's not beyond repair. And, again, Billy Moore says because Joker 2 was a misfire from the first movie has nothing to do with WB hating the fan base. That's something that people are saying. People are saying that the fan base, people hate the fan base. And, I just don't understand that myself. I said precisely, Joker was a flash in the pan, a one-hit wonder, a film that didn't need a sequel. The previous regime was never good at reading the room and understanding how things worked. By all accounts, this movie is a slog. I will admit that the goodwill of the first would garner a better outcome than this, but it isn't looking good. The Penguin doing fantastic, Superman was such a big hit that they decided to give it a wide release. Joker 2 should never have happened. This isn't on the current team, even though they will get the blame. And we're going to move on to that because, again, whose fault is that for this movie right now? Because that's the big question. Whose fault is it? Well, did James Gunn actually boycott Joker 2 behind the scenes out of jealousy of Todd Phillips to make his upcoming slate look fresh? Well, what? Now we know this Comic X book guy hates James Gunn. He does everything in his power to make him look bad on social media. He is a Snyder cultist, if you want to call him that, whatever you want to call them. He is out there always ragging on James Gunn. So he puts things like this, and he mentions this. You mentioned movies like Batman and Joker are separate from DCU. This is an old conversation, mind you, months ago. How much are you involved in these movies? Do you know what their stories are? Did read the scripts? Love from Egypt at James Gunn. James Gunn says, Todd had Joker in full swing by the time we came on board. I've watched and given notes, but it was mostly with Warner Brothers when it started. Everything forward and live action we're involved with. Well, Comics Kid or Comics X Book, whatever your name is, you kind of shot yourself in the foot here because you're trying to make James Gunn look bad, but you're actually making him look right. You're making him look good. You're showcasing that he didn't have much to do with this movie. You know? We move on. The Green Casey pointing, giving the middle finger to the Joker poster as they walk out saying, I hate you, Todd Phillips. I guess they didn't like the movie, but you then have your Turkish bud or your Turkish friend say, hate James Gunn, not Todd Phillips. Well, this just gets down to the point where there's people that want to sit there and say, James Gunn needs to stop taking credit for things that he didn't do. But then when people give credit to the movies and the films that James Gunn didn't do, they then say, well, no, you have to blame James Gunn for it. James Gunn had nothing to do with this movie. He gave some notes. That's fine. I mean, believe it or not, in the film industry, when directors and producers, they talk to each other, if they sit down and watch movies, watch early cuts of films and things like that, directors will ask, hey, do you have any notes? Do you have any thoughts? And they will give their thoughts. That's essentially giving notes. And sometimes they take those notes, sometimes they don't. That is how Hollywood works. I wish people would understand that simply because James Gunn gives notes doesn't mean that it's going to completely change the concept and idea of this movie. Todd Phillips is still in control of that movie. That is still his film. It wasn't like James Gunn went in there and completely altered the film. And our friends at the Culture Nerd, that is because this wasn't made by DC Studios. And DCU Brief says that DC Studios is not listed in the end credits of Joker 2. And that's a thing. People are starting to realize, wait a minute, this isn't a DC Studios movie? Huh. So James Gunn's input would be very minimal at best. And wait a minute, we just saw a thing where he said just that in a Threads post. The credits simply state based on characters from DC and display the old DC logo at the end. Interesting. And the Culture Nerd says that is because this wasn't made by DC Studios. It was the final product of the last management. Very, very interesting. And we keep going. Gray Harden, he kind of backs up what we're saying here. And with Comic X Book, he goes, man, these people are dumb. Joker has always been a Warner Brothers production under Pamela Abdy and Mike DeLuca. Those names sound very familiar, do they not? Remember, those two were very much part of the crew that were helping The Rock try to take over the DC franchise, the DC IP, and run with that, making The Rock the centerpiece of DC, and the power of whatever is going to change in the DC universe, and blah blah blah, that stuff. They're the ones that convinced Henry to announce that he was back as Superman without a contract. They're the ones that help The Rock screw everything up, get fans excited about Henry Cavill returning, and then when they didn't get their way, unfortunately, Cavill never got his contract, was never actually returning, and everything fell apart. It was those two. But Abney and DeLuca, they're part of this. They're the ones that were part of pushing for the Joker too. And they found a way to put the blame on Gunn for this mess. And it's not them. The fans are trying to put blame on Gunn. And unfortunately, that is what's going to happen. And I think that's why I keep saying over and over again, the more that they get away from that old DC, that old regime as much as possible, the better. And that is why I kept saying, and I keep saying, that the worst idea for Gunn was to keep any remnants of the old DCEU. I know Peacemaker was his. I know those characters were his, in that little sandbox, those iterations. I get it. But if you just distanced yourself, you pushed it away, and even if you went back to it maybe 2 or 3 years down the line after you reestablished the DCU, maybe it would have made sense. But to continue it right now was not the best idea. You really had to distance yourself as much as possible early on. That's one of the issues that I've had with Gunn, is not distancing himself enough from the old DC and the old management team there. But we continue on. People forgetting about this and saying, thank God he has nothing to do with the movie. Who's the clown now? And that's the thing. Again, this just saying, Todd had Joker in full swing before he came on board. People were so happy when he said this, but now they're twisting the narrative and saying, oh, he gave notes. He gave notes. Oh, man. I literally saw somebody post a picture and say, this shot wasn't even in the movie. I bet you James Gunn had him remove it. And then somebody said, oh, you betcha that happened. Like, come on. You have no basis to go off of that. Things get left on the editing floor all the time. And maybe it was just a promotional shot. It's an artsy movie. So they make promotional shots for artsy movies like this, especially higher budget artsy movies. They'll make promotional shots just for the marketing that are never even intended for the movie. People need to just relax. They're finding any reason possible to blame James Gunn, to blame DC Studios, to sit there and say, look, they're bad. And it's getting out of hand. It is really getting out of hand. And again, this is another one. Generally shocked they cut this. And I guess this scene was cut from the movie. Again, I haven't seen the movie yet, but they're shocked that this is cut. And this person probably is certain someone gave notes. Again, no basis to go off of that this shot was cut or this scene was cut because of James Gunn, but that's what they're insinuating. It's getting out of hand. There's no reason to say this. There's no reason at all. None. But again, you don't like Gunn. You don't like that DC Studios is around. You don't like that there's going to be a DCU. And you're upset that this movie is bad. Well, Todd Phillips wrote the movie. Todd Phillips made the movie. Joaquin Phoenix is the Joker in the movie. Lady Gaga is Lee Quinn in the movie. You can be upset about them. You can be upset about Todd Phillips. At most, James Gunn gave some notes. It's not a DC Studios production. I can tell you that much. You want to know how I know this? Well, if we look here, Industrial Light and Magic actually helped with the special effects in this movie. And if we go down here, you take a look at the credits here, and they go into it. It says Warner Brothers Pictures presents a joint effort production, a film worldwide by Warner Brothers Pictures, and nowhere in here does it say DC Studios. Nowhere in here. The only thing that it says in here about DC is it says based on characters by DC. And where is it at? I lost it. I was just looking at it, but I lost it. We'll just do the good old find. The good old find. There it is. Based on characters from DC. That's it. That's the only place that it says anything about DC. And that's coming from ILM. So this is their little like, hey, this is what we've worked on. And this is their production information. All right? We can take it even a step further and take a look at IMDb. And it shows production companies. DC Entertainment is not DC Studios. Joint effort. Quebec Film Television Tax Credit. Village Roadshow Pictures. Warner Brothers. You do not see DC Studios in here. Now, I know people are going to get upset. Well, James Gunn should not just be picking and choosing what he wants to do. Here's the thing. He's not picking and choosing. This was done in production, up and running before he was in charge. The Penguin was put into production after he was in charge. All right? So that's under DC Studios. That makes sense. Superman, they bought the rights under Warner Brothers, and DC Studios bought the rights. That's why it's under DC Studios. That's how it works. And he said it in his post. He said it. I lost it, didn't I? I lost it. Oh, here it is. He says it in his post. Joker was in full swing by the time we came on board. Everything forward after the Joker live action we're involved with, which means everything after the Joker is part of DC Studios. He said this months and months ago. So just accept it. All right? Yes, this is a big lose, a big loss for DC. DC and Warner Brothers. There's no denying that. But this movie should have never been made. I'm man enough to admit that. Again, I didn't want it in the first place. I didn't like the first one. But let's be honest here. We need to stop this finger pointing and saying, well, James Gunn sucks because of this. This is all James Gunn. It's not James Gunn's fault. This movie's bad. If you think it's bad, it's bad. I haven't seen it yet. But if you think it's bad because it's a bad movie because Todd Phillips made a bad movie. It's a bad movie because the old regime who greenlit this movie with Todd Phillips greenlit a bad movie. Plain and simple. That simple. That's it. Full stop. That's where it stops. That's all it is. But let me know, did you see Joker 2? Joker Dave Coulier, as I like to call it, and Folie, Deux, whatever it's called. Did you see it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Who do you think is at fault for this? Let me know in the comments below. And with all that said, I'll catch you all later.